Good evening. Welcome to the Durham District School Board meeting of March 20th. This meeting is called to order. To give the land acknowledgement is to honor the First Nations Indigenous people who have lived and worked on this land historically and presently. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, the Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school boards and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territories of the Mississauga Island First Nations, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Jardina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. We will be going to O Canada. I will turn it over to Trustee Thatcher to introduce Blair Ridge Public School Senior Band.
Thank you, Chair. Please join with me in welcoming the Blair Ridge Bobcat Senior Band, who will be performing O Canada for us this evening. The band is made up of students in grade 8 at Blair Ridge Public School and is accompanied and conducted by music director Reagan Jones, who is the junior intermediate music teacher at Blair Ridge. Principal Elaine Warburton is also in attendance this evening, and we extend a warm welcome to you all.
Please stand.
Please stand.
Thank you for the O Canada from Blair Ridge Public School. I much appreciate it. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Director of Education, Camille Williams-Taylor, to perform the declaration of office.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I will start from my chair here, and then myself and our new trustee will advance to the podium for the declaration. Tonight is indeed a special night, one that we have the privilege of welcoming new trustee Jill Thompson as First Nations representative to the Durham District School Board of Trustees. It is my hope that Jill's appointment to the Board of Trustees will support the growth of a meaningful partnership between treaty community partners, and the DDSB, and will foster respectful collaboration to address the legacy of ongoing effects of the past and to make visible the possibilities of moving forward. Thank you for joining the Durham District School Board of Trustees and for providing your guidance and perspective as a board member. Thank you in advance, who understands the lived experiences, strengths, and needs of the Durham District School Board students, families, employees, and community members who identify as First Nations, Métis, or Inuit. And at this time, I'd like to invite you, Jill, to join me at the table to recite your declaration. They told me this would work.
I, Jill Thompson, do solemnly declare that I am not disqualified under any act from being a member of Durham District School Board. I will truly, faithfully, impartially, and to the best of my ability execute the office of the board member, and that I have not received and will not receive any payment or reward or promise thereof for the exercise of any partiality or malversation or other undue execution of the said office, and that I will disclose any pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, as required by and in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, declared before me at the town of Whitby in the province of Ontario this 20th day of March, 2023. Congrats.
On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I am pleased to welcome Jill Thompson to the Board of Trustees. Jill's appointment to the DDSB Board of Trustees is an important step towards ongoing reconciliation and to upholding the board's responsibilities and commitments set out in the Indigenous education policy. We appreciate the opportunity and look forward to learn from Trustee Thompson while working together to meet the needs of all Indigenous students, families, and staff in the DDSB community. Thank you, and welcome. Moving on to item 5 of the, which is the declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest at this time? Hearing none, there's no statement of declaration of interest at this time. I'm moving on to item 6 of the adoption of the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as distributed? Trustee Brown, a seconder. Trustee Miller, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, moving on to the minutes. I have basically 4 sets of minutes, but I will look at to receive the approved minutes of the regular board meeting of January 23rd, as well as the minutes of the special board meeting of February 6, 2023. Can I have a motion to receive those 2 sets? Trustee Cunningham, Trustee Arsenault, any discussion on those minutes? All in favor of those minutes? Opposed? That motion is carried. We also have the draft minutes, 2 sets of draft minutes. Have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of February 21st and the minutes of the special board meeting of March 6th. Trustee Pinello, Trustee Morton, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, we're moving on to item number 6, which is the ministry memorandums, and I will pass it over to Director Camille Williams-Taylor.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I do have a few remarks tonight. With the March break taking place last week, I hope that students, families, and staff had a chance to experience a slower pace or a break for some time for reflection. As today marks the spring equinox in the Northern Hemisphere, we are moving together into a cycle of rebirth and renewal, one that we like to call spring. Certainly, for many of us, the longer hours of sunlight are welcome and very uplifting after a long winter. For many in the Muslim community, the start of Ramadan is expected to begin the evening of March 22nd, signaling a period of fasting, prayer, and deep reflection. We wish a peaceful month to all the Durham District School Board families observing Ramadan. The 2023 summer school course information is now available. Durham Continuing Education offers a variety of credit and non-credit programs for students in grades 6 through 12. Anyone interested in finding out more about the summer learning opportunities is encouraged to visit the DCE website at dce.ca. In addition, the Government of Ontario recently announced that they are implementing a new high school graduation requirement. Starting with students entering grade 9 in September of 2024, all students will be required to earn a grade 9 or 10 technological education credit as a part of their Ontario Secondary School diploma. There remain many questions about this new requirement, which will require discussion with all of our partners and the sector. More information about this new requirement will be shared with students, families, and staff as it becomes available. I'd like to close my comments this evening by referencing 2 important days of significance that are ahead. Tomorrow, March 21st, is the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. The theme for this year focuses on the urgency of combating racism and racial discrimination 75 years after the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. March 31st marks International Transgender Day of Visibility. On this day, we reiterate our ongoing commitment to the transgender community in our DDSB places of learning and work, ensuring that you feel seen and heard. A recent United Nations statement really resonated as I prepared my comments for this evening. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights and have the potential to contribute constructively to the development and well-being of their societies. As a school board, we are committed to the dignity of our students and families, not just through our actions, policies, and procedures, but also in the spirit of all of our interactions. Tomorrow, on the International Day for the Elimination of Racism, and on March 31st, Transgender Day of Visibility, we are all called upon to reflect with care and concern for those who have been and continue to be negatively impacted because of their identities, and turn our minds, hearts, and actions to eradicating oppression, erasure, and dehumanization that targets some people in our community. Healthy debate is an important aspect of a democratic society. However, as evidenced here tonight, we will work hard to ensure that every child, every family, every staff member knows that they are valued and that they belong just the way they are. That's all for my remarks tonight.
Thank you, Director. We are now on item 9, which is public question period. I would like to invite Dylan to ask the first question of this evening, and he is on virtually.
All right.
Go ahead, Dylan. Dylan.
Everybody!
Go ahead and ask your question.
Welcome to the first questions period of daylight saving time and the spring equinox. So, my question tonight is about the Maple Ridge boundary review, which has been ongoing since 2020. Since back on about 3 years ago, back on January 20th, 2020, there was a report that came forward that outlined a boundary review for the Maple Ridge as the enrollment continues to grow there. But since then we've been at the height of the pandemic, and nothing's really happened. And moving these students to Von Willard, it would actually increase the enrollment there by significantly. I'm wondering if you guys are considering moving the English track between two schools, maybe having half go to Von Willard, half go to Glen Road Public School in Pickering. I think that's it for my questions right now.
Thank you, Dylan. I will pass it on to Associate Director Wright for a response.
Thanks very much. Good evening, Dylan. Thanks for the question. Thanks for your suggestions of maybe how we can help support that school community, accommodating the students. As you mentioned, a boundary review was started for Maple Ridge back in January 2020 with the intent to establish Maple Ridge as a single-track French immersion school and to adjust the regular track boundary for Von Willard Public School. At the time, enrollment in French immersion across the district was growing at a very significant pace. The pandemic was interesting. It brought about a number of changes, and among them was an unanticipated reduction in the pace of growth of the French immersion program across the district. The boundary review at Maple Ridge was put on pause back in 2020 due to community feedback, while other options were explored. Since then, we have seen the enrollment growth slow, and the enrollment that was projected back in 2020 for Maple Ridge for this time, for 2023, is lower than the number of students actually there this year by about 100. So that takes some of the pressure off the need to make a decision on a quick basis, which is good because we feel we need a little bit more time and data to update and establish new trends for the French immersion program and see if the growth picks up pace or if it stays as it has for the last couple of years with a little bit slower growth. So we'll keep everybody informed on the process as we get that additional data over time. Thank you.
I do have a supplemental question as well.
Yes, Dylan, go ahead with your supplemental.
Yeah, I do remember when that school was a single-track English, because in 2012, I remember the school was really under capacity and it was really struggling to stay open. I'm wondering if we could compare the enrollment data from the 2012-2013 school year to the fall of 2012 and the current school year together. I'm wondering what is the difference between the 2012-13 school year and this school year in terms of the enrollment at Maple Ridge?
Go ahead, Associate Director. I don't know if you have those numbers.
Thanks,
or be able
Madam
to
Chair.
answer.
Through you, Dylan, I'm sorry I don't have the enrollment data back to 2012 or 2013. I know that we're looking forward. We're at about 628 students right now at Maple Ridge. We were projecting over 725 for this time 3 years ago. And so the growth has slowed significantly, and we have a little bit of time yet to make a decision on how we move forward. But when we do move forward, certainly input, and so we'll look forward to hearing your suggestions then.
All right. Hope everyone has one of
Thank you, Dylan and Associate Director Wright. The second question this evening is being asked in person. I would like to invite Jessica Wilkins to ask the question. Jessica Wilkins? Just push the button on the mic.
Hello? My question is, who approves reading materials, example, books in the library for DDSB? Who pays for these books, and does it come out of our taxpayers' dollars?
Thank you. I'm going to ask Associate Director Markowski and Superintendent Davis to respond. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Teacher librarians work collectively with their school administration, school staff, and board personnel to purchase, introduce, and distribute school-based library and learning resources. And they're also afforded the responsibility to review materials to ensure that they're current, culturally responsive, and in alignment with our Indigenous education policy, our human rights policy, and our learning resource selection policy, and also our procedures. So the library resources are purchased through the school block budget and can be supplemented with funds from community school council through fundraising events, such as, for example, book fairs, with approval from the school principal.
You can ask one supplementary as pertains to the answer or the original question. Thank you.
Where can us parents voice concerns about the nature or content of the books currently present in public school libraries across Ontario and Canada?
Associate Director Markowski.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I think as an initial step, what I would encourage you, if you do have a concern about a specific title, that you would speak to the school principal.
There are multiple.
Thank you.
So bring that to the attention of the school principal, and they could involve board personnel as needed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question, I ask Mandy Dalton to come forward to ask the question. Just push the button. Thank you.
Okay, now, there we go. In a previous meeting, the board explained that children were being asked to identify their gender and/or sexual orientation in order to help fight against bullying and for inclusivity. Why is the school board focused on the differences between students instead of spotlighting the fact that no one should be bullied regardless? Why not teach that as a blanket human decency element of kindness instead?
Thank you for your question. I'm going to ask basically Superintendent Hamid to respond, or Director Wright, Associate Director Wright. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate you reaching out to discuss the school board's approach to promoting inclusivity and combating bullying. Your concerns are valid and reflect a common misunderstanding of the importance of recognizing and affirming diversity. At the core of all decision-making, we must recognize that human dignity is essential. The school board's approach to promoting inclusivity is not about focusing on differences, but rather acknowledging and valuing the diversity of all individuals. To create a safe and welcoming learning environment for all students, we must recognize that each individual is unique and deserves to be treated with dignity, respect, and kindness. Simply teaching human decency as a blanket element of kindness is not enough to combat bullying and promote inclusivity. We must go beyond this and actively work to dismantle systemic discrimination and bias that exists in our society. By recognizing and affirming the diversity of all students, we can challenge the harmful stereotypes and prejudice that lead to bullying and exclusion. In short, the school board's approach is not about emphasizing differences, but rather about recognizing and valuing the humanity of all individuals. I'm hopeful that we can work together to create a more inclusive and equitable learning environment for all students.
Thank you. You can... Thank you. If I can proceed with the rest of the questions. Thank you. If we can proceed with the rest of the questions. You have one supplementary, I assume. Is that it? If you could please, again, it's a response to the question, the original question, or the answer. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. So you say that it's part of the policy and a blanket human kindness is not just enough, that you need to go further. So as concerned parents and community, who would we talk to change this to policies that do not molest the minds of children?
Thank you for your question. Thank you for your question. The question was answered as far as our process is concerned. Director Camille Winsteller, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. The answer to the question is essentially that we're going to continue to focus on the individual needs of students, and that includes their identities as well as their dignity. We believe that the work that we've already done around the human rights policy, the Indigenous rights policy, will guide us in that, and that we will not be creating future policies that differentiate in that way.
We're going to move on to the next question. We're going to move on to the next question. Thank you. The next question is going to be asked by, we'll invite Barry Bedford to the podium, please, for the next question.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back, Director Taylor. It's great to see you again. As you're all aware, data shows that the 2S LGBTQ population is amongst the most bullied and often struggling academically within Ontario schools due to perceived lack of support. As a gay parent myself and a parent of the DDSB student, and I'm also a member of the executive of PFLAG Durham Region, I'd like if you could highlight the work and initiatives that you currently have place for students and families.
Thank you for that question. I'm going to direct that to Superintendent Hamid. Right, to Superintendent, Associate Director Markowski, thank you.
Thank you for your question, Barry. What I wanted to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about when we refer to the work, talk a bit about policy development, the work that we're doing with our community partners and our staff and employee groups, give a few examples of initiatives, and then that'll kind of consolidate. I hope sort of that captures in terms of the question that you're asking. So the Durham District School Board has taken significant steps towards fostering a culture of inclusivity and respect through its human rights policy and procedures. This policy focuses on proactive actions to promote, protect, and uphold human rights, and to identify, prevent, and address all forms of discrimination, including homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia, within the Durham District School Board's learning and working environments. Schools are currently working through the school learning plan process that places focus on the implementations of the human rights policy into action items at the school level. The DDSB has been in consultation with the Visible Everyday Committee. That's an employee group focused on supporting the work of the 2S LGBTQI school community. who have offered recommendations to ensure that inclusion and respect are a part of the school culture every day. Now, in those recommendations, they actually engaged in a community outreach process to gather voice from the 2S LGBTQI community that helped to sort of devise what I would say an actionable plan of recommendations. So we're continuing to work with the Visible Everyday Committee to establish communication structures and an implementation strategy for the recommendations that were outlined in the action plan. To give some examples of initiatives that we're undertaking, the DDSB has established a GSA at every secondary school across the system, providing a safe space for students to connect, share experiences, and access resources. The weekly virtual secondary GSA in partnership with community partners extends its supports to students who may not have access to in-person resources, and there are currently GSA conferences that are being planned. I also want to take a moment to recognize the importance of commemorating events. For example, the Transgender Day of Remembrance, the Transgender Awareness Week, Pink Shirt Day, International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia, and Pride Month. These events provide an opportunity for the school community to come together, learn, and celebrate diversity. Learning resources to support this important work throughout the year are housed in our DDSB's Culturally Responsive School Google Classroom and provides educators with lessons, texts, and resources to support their teaching and foster a more inclusive learning environment for our 2S LGBTQI students. This, along with our new resource selection policy, ensures that students have access to a diverse range of resources in their schools that reflects the diversity of the community. I do want to end and recognize that there is more work that needs to be done. We will continue to work with our education partners to best support our 2S LGBTQI students, families, staff, and community members. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary?
I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of the trustees and superintendents, the director and associate directors for all the work you are doing. I just want you to know that it does truly save lives when you are recognizing all identities, and as a member of that community and as a executive with PFLAG, we get the calls and we know that the work you're doing is saving lives. So thank you so much for all that you're doing for the community.
Thank you. We are now going to move on to the next question. I would like to invite Clint Cole to come forward to ask the question.
Good afternoon, Chair, and all board members, and those others sitting at the table. My name is Clint Cole, and in the interest of having fair representation around this board to help deal with, multiple issues, my question is, will this board chair and remaining board members create a standing parent representation on this Durham District School Board in the same way that you have for the students, so that we have representation for students, which is important as well. But student parents are unarguably major and the most invested stakeholders in the resulting impacts from decisions made by this board. It only makes clear, logical, and intelligent sense that parents are also sit at this table to communicate their wisdom and insight into the school board policy development in a timely way. Why should they not, my question to, or the adjunct question is, why should they not participate in collaborative oversight of their children's overall development and personal welfare in this regard, when our children spend the very bulk of their day and time in the school? So timely representation and development of policy to key stakeholders like parents, like most of us in this room, I think is actually a really good idea, and one that I'd like to see this board adopt. And I speak for many parents, not just myself, incidentally.
Thank you for that question. First, I will pass it on to Executive Lead Robert Sujanik, but I must say under the Education Act, it specifically identifies, as well as the Election Act, and who qualifies to run as trustees. And I can say that there are parents sitting around this table that are representative of the Durham community, as well as we do have 3 student trustees to represent the student's voice, who sit on Student Senate, we have committees, as well as we have a parent committee, a PIC committee. But I will pass the rest of the answer on to Executive Lead Surjanik.
Thank you, Chair Edwards. I think you covered most of it. I'll just provide some clarification around student trustee representation on the board that's mandated for all school boards in Ontario by the province through the Education Act. Here at the DDSB, there are 3 student trustees elected by their peers who serve a 1-year term. So their role is to represent the entire student body as a student trustee, bring forward items for discussion faced by students, and to seek ways to improve the experience of students in schools. As well, the voice of parents, guardians, and caregivers are an essential component of school boards, and this happens in many different ways. So eligible voters, including parents, have the right to elect school board trustees who work together in the best interests of all parents and students. School board trustees, as the chair mentioned, represent a broad cross-section of community members and have typically included parents of current students or former students, retired educators or education workers, and just across the DDSB for the awareness of the public. There are many opportunities for parents to get involved and provide input. That's including through school community councils at the school level, also the district-wide parent involvement committee that reports annually on its activities to the Board of Trustees. Any residents eligible to vote in Durham is also eligible to run for the position of school board trustee, and that includes parents and guardians, and of course at all times parents, guardians, and caregivers are free to communicate with board members by email or telephone, or to their school principal where appropriate, to bring forward their concerns, ideas, thoughts, and questions for consideration.
Thank you. Do you have a supplemental? Push the button on the...
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
In light of that, my supplementary question would be to challenge this board, because I think, yes, there's input at different levels, but this is a very crucial input venue and process, and it's the lead one that finally makes decisions. So I think it's important that I would challenge the board. Could you not do something and create and be a leader and maybe create an active standing parent liaison committee that you could consult with in a timely way as policy develops? Because I think the input can't be at this lower level for parents to respond in order to hear their voices. If we can have students at this table, why shouldn't we have parents in the same way so they have the same input at the same level?
Thank you for your question. We'll take that under advisement. We're going to move on into the next section of our meeting, which is the report from the Committee of the Whole. I'll pass it on to Vice Chair.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The board approved the actions of the Committee of the Whole in camera and adopted the motions made at the Committee of the Whole in camera meeting as follows. The disclosure of intimate personal or financial information in respect of a member of the board or committee, an employee or prospective employee of the board, or a pupil or his or her parent or guardian. Decisions in respect of negotiations with employees of the board, and administrative transfers and placement. Chair Edwards, this is my report. I move that the board receive the actions of the March 20, 2023 in-camera meeting.
Thank you for that motion. May I have a seconder? Trustee Cunningham. All in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Moving on to item 11, which is good news from the system. Director Milton Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I will turn to Executive Lead Sir Janik to start us off with the good news from the system.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of DDSB students and staff, we are happy to bring you good news from across the system.
Dr. Palmater, a Mi'kmaq lawyer, spoke with passion and understanding of the myths and facts about Indigenous rights at the recent Parent Engagement Speaker Series presentation, making the point that Indigenous peoples are not monolithic. Dr. Palmater acknowledged that everyone is on their own learning journey and encouraged attendees to take the time to research the importance and complexity of Indigenous history. Robert Cutting joined students at St. Clair Secondary School to talk about the history of Indigenous people, storytelling, and traditions. Cutting also shared examples of how Indigenous people have been misinterpreted with stories such as that of Christopher Columbus.
O'Neill CVI presented the SpongeBob musical, with 45 students taking the stage and many more working behind the scenes. Staff and students sought to find a musical that reflects the joy that everyone feels in once again creating together, singing loudly, laughing uproariously, and feeling deeply through the power of live theater. The sets, props, and costumes were creative and DIY-esque. The songs were composed to fit the plot by a variety of popular artists and a diverse range of musical styles that reflects the diversity of the characters in the show and the students in the cast. Well done, O'Neill. Whitby Shores Public School presented The Wizard of Oz, an inclusive play with many different roles and entry points into the arts, and students played them incredibly well. From selecting and announcing the show, holding auditions, rehearsals, creating paints and sets, choreographing dances, to performing in dress rehearsals and final performances, everyone involved had a wonderful time. The staff are so proud of their musical family and are thankful for all the individuals who played a part in making the musical go from a thought to a polished performance. It was an amazing experience from start to finish. Well done, Whitby Shores.
Cataract Public School students are participating in Mani Musicale, an engaging competition that spotlights 16 popular French songs and pits them against each other in a March Madness-style competition. Students listen to the songs and complete a bracket to predict which songs they believe will be most popular. Then, students from all over the world will have the opportunity to vote on which song they prefer in each matchup. This year, there are more than 4,000 schools participating, including several others from DDSB. Stay tuned until the end of March to see the results.
GL Roberts CVI was very excited to host a Taste of Culture event. The Black Student Association, with the assistance of staff, provided an amazing experience for every student that included music and food. Thank you to the GL Roberts staff that helped make this event one to remember.
Each year, the Anderson CVI Raiders and Henry Street High School Hawks participate in Rivalry Week. This three-day epic sports bonanza sees the school's teams compete as the Mayor's Cup hangs in the balance. To start the week, each school participated in a pep rally and rehearsed cheers in support of their teams. Next, Anderson CVI hosted a senior girls volleyball game. Henry Street High School returned the favor by hosting the senior boys basketball game the next day. More than 200 students and staff from each school attended, exemplifying their school spirit and cheering on their teams. The climactic final event was a senior boys hockey match at Iroquois Park, where more than 600 students attended, with CKDO radio personality Terry Johnston as the official game announcer. With exceptional exuberance and energy, both the Raiders and the Hawks experienced incredible spirit, school pride, and a deeper sense of community.
In February, Olympic silver medalist and DDSB educator Shelley Ann Brown spoke to students at Pierre Elliott Trudeau Public School about dedication, perseverance, and Black excellence. Her messages of inspiration to students included breaking down barriers, following your dreams, and believing in yourself. After the assemblies, staff and students inducted Shelley Ann into the school's Black Excellence Wall of Fame, so that her legacy can continue to inspire students and families throughout the community.
Scott Central Public School students Isaac and Daniel are budding comic book creators. They gather their ideas from different movies and then collaborate on writing and drawing comic books. Isaac is currently working on a new comic book called Star Wars 2, which will be ready soon. Daniel and Isaac enjoy working with each other. We can't wait to see what these two come up with in the future.
Uxbridge Secondary School hosted the first ever inclusive culinary competition for students across Durham region. The event even had a few celebrity judges. Mr. Dave Brown, culinary teacher at Uxbridge Secondary School, along with staff, brought together an opportunity for inclusivity and hospitality. This is the first competition of its kind, allowing all students to compete at a regional level. PLP students were paired with grade 12 culinary students in an intense culinary battle. Family members, staff, students, and judges were there to cheer them on. Mr. Brown hopes this competition will be picked up by Ontario Skills and was thrilled to see the smiles in the room that day. We're here to show everybody how amazing these students really are, said Mr. Brown.
Students at Eastdale CVI worked, collaborated, and brainstormed on who to feature on their highly anticipated Black Excellence mural. The mural was revealed on March 16th. A huge thank you to our Eastdale Black People Speak group and their staff advisors, Miss Griffiths, Miss Rose, and Miss Steer for helping to organize this beautiful mural, and to everyone who attended.
Now celebrated worldwide, Pink Shirt Day had humble beginnings. Originally inspired by an act of kindness in a small town in Nova Scotia, schools throughout the district showed their support by dressing up in pink shirts and displaying acts of kindness, empathy, and understanding in support of those impacted by bullying. Thank you to our staff and students for lifting each other up this Pink Shirt Day and all year round.
Our students across the DDSB come to us with their own unique cultures, traditions, languages, and style. Here at the board, we love to celebrate what makes us unique. These characteristics contribute to our diverse makeup. It is important to celebrate our differences all year long and to create an inclusive environment for all of our students. Thank you to all of our schools who took the time to honor our students' diversities. Let's embrace our differences so we can truly be ourselves.
Congratulations to all DDSB students who competed from February 12th to the 14th in a fierce competition of professional development against 6,200 of Ontario's finest. DECA provincials determine who will compete in their categories at the International Career Development Conference. Participating in DECA equips our students with practical business knowledge and experience. Well done to all the DDSB participants.
The dates of significance, as you can see, take us up to the end of April.
Thank you to Yaman and Maya from Sinclair Secondary School for reading this month's good news.
Thank you for the good news of the system. We're moving on to recommended actions. Item 12A, which is a report from Standing Committee, Vice Chair Thatcher.
Thank you, through you, Chair. My report can be found on pages 30 to 33. I move that the board now receive the minutes and approve the actions of the March 6, 2023 Standing Committee meeting.
We have that motion on the floor. May I have a seconder? Trustee Pinello. Any comments? Motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Next recommended action is item 12B. I am going to ask Trustee Tracy Brown about rescissions of policies and regulations from Peoples and Culture.
Thank you. And through you, Chair Edwards, I bring forward as a recommendation item, People and Culture, rescission of policies and regulations, and inclusive student services, rescission of policy. There'll be two. So on pages 34 to 93 of the agenda package, you will find a report regarding a selection of policies and regulations under the People and Culture Department, including a recommendation that the rescission of these policies and regulations be approved today. This recommendation comes following staff review of the policies and regulations, the passing of a resolution by the Governance and Policy Committee on February 1st, 2023, and a notice of motion to the board on February 21st, 2023. The full listing of policies and regulations are included in Appendix A of this report, starting on page 36. I move that the Board of Trustees rescind the policies and regulations as 12B Appendix A.
I have a motion on the floor. May I have a seconder, please? Trustee Thatcher. Any comments or questions regarding the rescission of those policies? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Carry on, Trustee Brown, with the next group of policies.
Okay, so I bring forward another recommendation, a notice of motion, inclusive student services, rescission of policy. On pages 94 to 100 of the agenda package, you will find a report regarding the school attendance officer policy, including a recommendation that rescission of the policy be approved today. This recommendation comes following staff review of this policy, the passing of a resolution by the Governance and Policy Committee on February 1st, 2023, and a notice of motion to the board on February 21st, 2023. The policy is included in Appendix A of this report on page 96. I move that the Board of Trustees rescind the policy and as 12C Appendix A.
Okay, I have that motion on the floor. May I have a seconder? Trustee Morton, any questions or comments on the rescission of that policy? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Trustee Brown.
Thank you.
Moving on to the school year calendar, I'm going to ask Associate Director Jim Markowski to speak about the new school year calendar.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Edwards, the report begins on page 101 of your package this evening, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to our proposals for the 2023-2024 school year calendars. The Ministry of Education requires boards to submit calendar proposals prior to the start of the next school year. This year, the submission date for school boards is April the 14th. Regulation 304 outlines requirements for school year calendars that boards must align to. It stipulates the need to schedule 194 school days, where 3 days must be designated as professional development days devoted to provincial education priorities. As a school board, we're permitted 4 further professional activity days for board-designated activities. The remaining days are to be instructional days. The DDSB has schools operating on 1 of 4 school calendars, so we have regular calendars for both elementary and secondary, as well as modified versions for both panels. And as such, we have developed 4 calendars for your approval. Our initial proposed calendars were shared with stakeholder groups through a consultation process, which is outlined in the report on page 102. As a result of the feedback received, we've made some revisions that are reflected in the proposed calendars. I'd also like to highlight that the calendars have been developed in conjunction with the Durham Catholic District School Board in order to minimize transportation costs where possible. And the last update we received actually this afternoon is that pretty much our professional activity days are directly aligned. So there is what I would say pretty much exact alignment between the Catholic Board and the Durham Board in terms of our draft calendars. So I'll refer you to the attachments within the report for your review and approval of our proposed 2023-2024 school year calendars. That marks the end of our report, and we'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Associate Director Markowski. I'm going to recognize Student Trustee Ben Cameron.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions and some comments as well. I think I'm just curious around maybe some of the context or history behind the modified schedules at the various elementary schools and secondary schools.
Go ahead, Associate Director Markowski.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, and Student Trustee Cameron. So we do have 2 elementary schools that are currently on a modified calendar. They usually start school after the civic holiday in August, and those were local decisions that were made at the school level, consulting with the various stakeholders. Right now, we have C. Broughton and Winchester in the Whitby municipality that operate under that calendar. In relation to the secondary panel, we have 3 schools. They start a week earlier, and they usually have an additional week added to their school calendar, which usually takes place that first week in November. And again, those are local school decisions that transition to the school to the modified secondary calendar, and that is Henry Street, Brock High School, and Maxwell Heights.
Supplemental?
Thank you. It's not a supplemental. It's just, yeah. So I would like to propose something to the board. And just in our progression towards inclusivity and diversity, I think that we should request to the ministry that we implement non-Christian religious holidays as board holidays. I know that Muslim people make up Thank you for that. I know that Muslim people make up the second largest religious demographic inside the DDSB for students, according to the 2019 student census. And I know that we talk a lot about making sure our curriculum and our teaching staff and our principals and administrators are reflective of our students, but I think that our holidays should be as well. And under Regulation 304, we're allowed to submit the modified schedules that we do for our several elementary and several secondary schools. And, you know, if we want to see this happen, we can't wait on the ministry. We should advocate for the change that we want to see, and this is just one way that we can do that. Yeah. I have, so what I would like to propose is that we move, that our first potentially board holiday would be Eid al-Fitr, which this year is April 20th, around there. And in 2024, it would be April 10th. And so I think that we should move the Piede on April 19th, or April 19th to the 10th, or even make that a board holiday. So I have a motion to put forward if trustees would just like to provide their comments first on that, and then we can figure something out.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have staff make a comment first, and then we'll go to trustees. If I could have Associate Director Jim Markowski make a comment on the possibilities or the impacts of moving, as well as a comment on the process of approving calendars, because I believe it's actually the Ministry of Education that eventually does approve our calendars as well. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Edwards. I guess there's a couple of points that I do want to address, and I want to thank Student Trustee Cameron for raising his points and bringing that focus of inclusivity in terms of our commitment as a board. The challenge here becomes is that when you look at various faith groups and dates of significance within each faith, there are numerous days throughout the calendar that may require attention. So I don't know how realistic within the working parameters of Regulation 304 it would be to create a structure that would allow for flexibility for every date of significance in the school year calendar. And I want to acknowledge that because I think it really stems beyond just one specific day. That being said, there are structures in place at the school level, and if it's staff that we're dealing with through our human resources department, that if individuals do need accommodations, we can support them through those means. Regulation 304 is very clear. We have three actually provincial professional activity days that we need to set, and up to an additional 4. So I don't know if the flexibility within the structure that Trustee Cameron is describing is realistic in terms of the parameters that we're working with for the submission of a school year calendar. I just want to be very realistic and upfront with the trustees in relation to that.
Thank you, and I'm going to go to Trustee Pinello for her comments.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Initially, I was going to say that if Student Trustee Cameron needed a motion made, I'd be happy to do that, but before I offer that, I do want to respond to Associate Director Markowski's comments that I would agree that it might seem difficult, daunting, or maybe not as flexible, but I would argue that that's because we've never really tried. And so I think that certainly there's importance in that when we are intentional about who we're trying to create space for, that it does require us looking at things with a whole different lens than we typically would, and that's just the nature addressing very structural, significant changes that, although they mean so much to groups of people, really haven't been done in many jurisdictions as of yet. So I think it's a wonderful thing that Student Trustee Cameron's brought forward, and I would be glad to move a motion to get it on the floor if that's required. Thank you.
I think I'll have Student Trustee Ben Cameron make his comment, and then we'll see how we proceed from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I did read Regulation 304, and one of the nice things is that if, well, so first, PA days, we don't have to have all the PA days that we do have right now, and this, what I think that we should do is just move a PA day. So we would keep the same amount of PA days that we currently have. As well, in the regulation, we're allowed to move the dates of PA days after it's been approved, as long as there's a resolution at the board that does that, and that does not require the permission of the ministry, which does allow us to have a bunch of flexibility in this decision going forward, to consult more if that's what needed. I think that's all I have. I can put forward a motion now to suggest a motion, if that's all right? Or
Yeah, you'll have to have a suggested motion, as student trustees are not allowed to put forth, but to suggest a motion, I would need trustees at the table to actually basically put the motion forward and second that, and then we can have a discussion on that as well. Thank you. So, you can suggest your motion at this point in time, and then we'll follow up.
So the motion would read as follows, that the school year calendars contained in appendices A and D be amended to include a PA day on April 10th, 2024, instead of a PA day on April 19th, 2024, and that those amended school year calendars be approved.
We'll deal with the basically amendment to the calendar as an amendment, and then we'll do the approval later. So I'm going to ask for a first to put the motion forward, and then a seconder. So I'm looking at Trustee Pinello had already said that she would move that motion. I'm assuming that Trustee Cunningham is doing the seconder. So that motion is up for discussion about moving the April 20th to the April 10th, if I've got that right, or the other way around. Yep, 19th. Okay, sorry. And so I'm going to ask for a speakers list. So we've got Trustee Cunningham to start.
Thank you. Primarily, I was going to table the motion for Trustee Cameron, but I'm glad it's been tabled by Trustee Pinello. I think this is a fantastic idea. As someone who does have to sign my children out of class for the major Jewish holidays so that we can attend synagogue, I do understand how frustrating it can be to families for their children to miss educational time for a faith that doesn't necessarily follow what we consider to be the majority. We have a lot of students from a lot of different faiths, and I would love to see them more tightly linked to our calendars as part of our sign of diversity. And while Judaism, we're a very small group, we may not have enough students to rank that many holidays on the calendar. To Student Trustee Cameron's point, there are quite a lot of Muslims and other faiths, and I would love to see, even if it means pulling back some of the holidays that we're used to seeing on the calendars, I would like to see that diversified. So I would love to see a report come back from Associate Director Markovsky and his team, showing us what that could look like and exploring some of those possibilities.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Cunningham. And what the motion actually has been put forward is actually not a report to actually do the change. So that might be the action that might come out of this. Who knows? We'll come back to you. I'm moving on to Trustee Linton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Again, I think that's an amazing motion. I like the innovation of this and the fact that it hasn't been done, but it can be done. And as a parent of school-age children, to my little friend down there with representation and other parents on the board, being part of the Parent Involvement Committee. I think this is something that would resonate across the board. My only question, and for you, Chair, this may be directed at the Associate Director. I really like the spirit of the students, but I don't want us to forget the educators and the teachers. So I'm trying to understand the PA days a little further. Like, if there was a PA day, would that permit educators and teachers who are practicing those religions and faiths to take that day off as well?
I will pass that question on to Associate Director Markovsky.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. And if I may, Trustee Linton, I think there's just a few other layers that I want to share, that you have as much information as you are when you're making these decisions. So anytime we change a PA day, as I was mentioning before, where there's not alignment with the Durham Catholic District School Board, and again, I'm not positioning that as a barrier, but I want you to be informed. Any day that's changed, I'm just getting a rough ballpark, you're looking at about $175,000 that it's costing the board in transportation costs. So that's the first part that I want to bring forward. In terms of the PA days themselves, we do have, for example, provincial priorities that are expected from the ministry for certain PA days. Other PA days are actually structured within collective agreement language that are designated, for example, for report card writing. So I want to bring forward that there are many layers in this conversation which would limit what I would say a broad flexibility in just moving professional activity days where we would see that they would be a best fit to accommodate dates of significance. I want to put that out there. Secondly, in relation to Trustee Linton's remark, we did engage in a consultation process. We consulted with education partners, our union partners, our leadership associations. They provided feedback. We sent a link to all schools. Schools made local decisions in terms of how it is to engage their community and bring their feedback forward. What we're providing you today is the consolidation of that feedback, and then at which point these 4 calendars were derived from that feedback. I mean, it begs the question if there are different ways that we want to engage in that feedback going forward in future years to ensure that we're taking a more culturally responsive approach. I think that's something we could absolutely give attention to as well.
Thank you. Any other additional comments around the table? Student Trustee Cameron.
Thank you, Chair. I thought about what our educators might have to deal with this, but I also recognize that I read the regulation and on all the rules around this, that the 4 mandatory days are the ones that we have to work with the province to have the priority days, and we could just make this, to me it seems like we could just make this day not one of those days. While recognizing like the cost and all that, I think this is a good option to start to move forward towards progress and change.
Associate Director Markovsky.
Through you, Chair Edwards, and sorry, Trustee Linton. Trustee Linton had mentioned in terms of staff and accessing days. Absolutely, human resources, they would connect with personnel, board personnel, and we would accommodate any staff in terms of a religious observance. And at the school level, if students and families are recognizing dates of significance within their faith, the school would work with the family to help support accordingly as well. I just want to make sure I touched on that point because he had brought it up.
Thank you. I have the Director of Education would like to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you very much, Superintendent Murkowski and Ben, for raising this. One of the things that I think about practically is how it is that we move forward from here. Certainly, it's a very valuable conversation. It's one that has been raised before in other contexts, not only around Eid, but in fact, other very significant days. And so I don't think it's a question of it being difficult. I think it's a question of the consultation process and the engagement process with the system, because we do know that there has been other areas and other groups who have come forward with areas of interest. Just from a practicality point of view, two things to consider. One is that this particular day is Wednesday, and Wednesday for families to have a PA day is operationally challenging for some families, so families may respond differently. But the other thing is that if we are recognizing Eid, at this point, we don't know that Eid is going to be on the 10th. And so that is the other question about whether or not it is actually the day that is the one that is going to be recognized. And then the final comment there is the concern about making a decision at this table without, again, going through the round of consultation, because one of the things that AD Murkowski has not added is that in the consultation process, what we actually came forward with prior to the consultation was actually amended and changed because of the consultation. And so what you see before you is actually the result of feedback that didn't match what we went out with. And so we had some other thoughts around ways to construct this school year calendar, and the process amended that. So should we then now make a essentially unilateral decision here at the table, I do have some questions about how that would be received by the system.
Thank you. I have Trustee Stone.
Thank you. I don't know if we can suspend the motion, but I'd like more information. I'd like to give staff a chance to look at this. Not against the motion, but as the director said, I think there's a lot more to this than what we can discuss tonight and make a decision on. So I'm wondering, I'm not sure, Chair, how you do that, if we can suspend it or motion to have, like Trustee Linton said, a report from staff. Thank you.
We can postpone for a particular period of time a motion, but recognizing that we have a deadline date, I believe, of April 14th to submit the calendar for this year. So it might be a possibility that, considering the consultation, that we do a postponement or look at it for the consultation process for the next year. That might be an alternate option. Again, it's sort of at the will of the board. If you're going to do a motion to postpone, it usually till the next meeting as far as that's concerned, but I mean, we can say that we can consider it in the cycle. It's kind of stretching the rules a bit, but consider the cycle as far as the next during the next calendar deliberation, as far as doing the consulting process. I'm not sure how as Trustee Stone, you might want to word that and at this point in time. And a postponement, just to make a note that a postponement supersedes basically if you're postponing or tabling it for a particular time, that supersedes the existing motion that is on the table, just so for process point of view. So Trustee Stone, I'll leave it up to you if you want to put a motion forward to postpone.
Yeah, Chair, am I correct in thinking that the rules are that it does go to the next meeting, so we would be, as you said, bending the rules on this? I'm wondering also if I don't postpone, would the people who put the motion forward be willing to, I forget what the word is, cancel that motion for tonight?
The motion is on the table, so we can't basically, at this point in time, rescind the motion. It would have to be defeated. But we can then introduce another motion if you want, as far as a report and so forth. I have Trustee Cunningham on just at this point in time. I'll come back to you.
Yes, you did say you would end up coming back to me with this. I echo Trustee Stone. I think it makes sense to have a report to look at this in the future, because with the deadline of April 14th, I think you said, I don't know that we could realistically make those changes in time. But I would love to see a report, not just around PA days, but around potentially moving some of those Christian holidays over to holidays of other faiths. But I second that I would rather see a report and look at it for a more impactful change than moving 2 days for the following school year.
Thank you, Trustee Cunningham. Trustee Pinello.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible for me to actually hear what Student Trustee Cameron has to say first before I give my comments?
For sure, I can pass it on to Student Trustee Cameron.
Yeah, thank you. On the consultation, I thought it was interesting because I hear a lot from Muslim students who just say, you know, like we just want to see our holiday, like we want our day off. We're missing school. We have to catch up on the work, and obviously they're accommodated, like they're not getting in trouble for not being at school, but they still have the work to catch up on, And one of the things that I think is important in this is that we can shift the PA days with a resolution of the board if we think so, because Eid does change the date based on the sighting of the moon and all this, and so we can make our, I guess you can say, best guess, and the Muslim community. I'm sure would appreciate that in reflecting their holidays. One thing about like all the different groups of people, religious people, want to see their holidays reflected in the calendar, and I don't think this is perfect. I looked at our calendar and I thought, you know, April 19th, PA Day is right next to Eid on the 10th. This is something that relatively simple that I think that we could do to start to put our best foot forward, to start the process of change. So I think one thing we could do is before the April 14th deadline, potentially come back on April 4th. I think we have a board meeting with a special board meeting, decide then. I think that would also be an option for trustees, but yeah, if trustees decide to defer, then that's all right.
Thank you for your comments, and I will, I'll ask Trustee Pinello, and then I'm sure Director Camille Williams-Taylor will have a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, and thank you, Student Trustee Cameron. I was going to suggest that instead of deferring to the next board meeting, which would put us after the date, we do have a Governance and Policy Committee meeting on the 29th, which is next Wednesday, and then we do have on the 3rd the Standing Committee meeting. So if that were to be seen as a reasonable amount of time to pull the report that some trustees are asking for, as well as to do a little bit more of the consultative work around the shifting or the earmarking of dates to allow for the flexibility with moon cycles for next year, then I would be glad to move that we defer to one of those two dates pending how quickly staff can pull that report and when it makes the most sense to add that to the agenda.
Thank you. I'm going to pass the speaker on to the Director of Education.
Thank you, Chair. So through you, in order to meet the 14th, the deadline of the 14th submission to the Ministry of Education, we would have to have a special board April 3rd standing committee to approve whatever agenda or whatever calendar it is that we're going to submit. So what you would be anticipating there would be a report of some kind that outlines for you the considerations that you need to undertake. What you will not have before you is a result of consultation. It would be unreasonable to expect that any kind of wholesome and fulsome consultation will take place in order to complete a report as well as have it submitted for that timeline. We can make every effort to do a perfunctory consultation, but with a significant change of this nature, you will be sure to hear from the public as a reasonable consultation will not take place. So what we are able to do is we would be able to provide something more fulsome in writing so that you are able to have something to reflect upon in your deliberation, and the deliberation would need to take place on the 3rd of April so that we are able to meet the deadline of the 14th of April for submission to the ministry.
Trustee Stone.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor, so I'd like to call the question.
Okay, so you're going to call you're asking to call the question, but I think there, at this point in time, there was also many comments about deferring it. I would, at this point in time, and although nobody has put the motion forward to defer it for a report before making the decision on the 3rd, there's also that as well. So. It was just that I want to ensure that, because there's been several people that have made that comment, I want to give that opportunity to the board to make that decision at this point in time.
And Chair Edwards, if I may,
Yeah.
Given Trustee Stone's indication of what she wanted to accomplish, it's my view that it's not necessary to call the question. If she wants to proceed with a motion to refer to committee or Trustee Pinello, I think that would take precedence, and the question could then be referred to the standing committee either standing committee on April 3rd or governance committee on the 29th.
Yes.
So I think that would take precedence, and I could just vote on that motion without calling the question on the original motion.
And thank you for that. And that's where I was trying to get clarity, because when she said called the question, I was wondering, because she hadn't really said that she was asking a motion to defer. She was questioning it. I hadn't actually heard, a motion to defer to the next standing committee. So just a point of clarification, Trustee Stone, if you could let me know when you're saying called the question.
Yeah, I'm just asking to vote on the motion that was put on the table, because even deferring this is not enough. There's not enough time for staff to, as the director said, for consultation or anything else. So I think we need to just vote on the motion put forward and then discuss what we want to do after that.
But the question's been called. Unfortunately, the question has actually been asked to come to a vote, so I must have the thing at this point in time.
I think, sorry, Chair Edwards,
Yes.
just for clarification, I do believe that our bylaws, I'm just looking for the right reference, but do require that that you ensure that everybody that wants to speak to the motion has had a chance before you call the question.
That's correct.
So I don't know if there's, I know some people have their mics blinking that have already spoken to it,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure. So I just put that on the table for your consideration.
Thank you again. So is there any person that has not spoken to the motion? And I believe Tracy has not spoken, or Trustee Morton, so we will go to those as the motion is go at this point in time. So Tracy, Trustee Brown.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I do agree with the motion, but I'm going to say that I feel that to ensure that it is inclusive to everyone and every religion, that we should actually look into this a little bit deeper, and rushing to get this done for this date to ensure that everyone is included, I think we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot. I don't think that's the right thing to do. So that's my, but I do feel that maybe for the next calendar year, through consultation, maybe start something now that this is looked at in more depth. So I don't know, I'm a bit cautious because taking away one thing from one person that they feel is important and replacing it with something else may be another issue. So that's where I stand on this motion right now. So I'm in agreement that it should be changed, but I don't know if it should be changed in a week. I don't feel that we will get the right voices at the table to make those kind of changes.
Thank you, Trustee Brown. Trustee Morton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I completely agree with Trustee Brown. I definitely support your ideas, Student Trustee Cameron, but I don't think with the time constraints that we have this year that it's a possibility. I definitely believe in a thorough consultation, and I would want to proceed with that first. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Morton. Is there anybody else that hasn't spoken to this motion that wishes to speak? Seeing none, as the mover, the question has been called, as far as, yes, but the question, it has been called for the floor, and I've asked people who have spoken, and the mover of the motion, which was Trustee Penello, may speak to close out the motion at this point in time if she wishes to speak. Yes, Trustee Cameron.
I believe according to our bylaws that only someone who hasn't spoken to the motion may call the vote, so I don't think that the vote's been called. And so I think, just quickly, I would like to suggest a motion to defer to the April 3rd, to an April 3rd special board meeting so that we can get the report and then see again. Trustees can decide, obviously, if they feel that's enough information or not enough information, and decide at that point. So I'd like to suggest that motion now.
So, Chair Edwards, if I may, the bylaws do provide that the motion to call the vote is to be made by a member who has not spoken on the motion, but and I don't have detailed notes of who's spoken, so I don't know whether Trustee Stone's comments were limited to the sort of the procedural question of how to call the question or postpone it, or whether she actually spoke to the main motion. So I think that's a decision you need to make in terms of what Trustee Stone's comments were, if they were related sort of to a parliamentary inquiry or a question of you in terms of how to deal with a deferral or a postponement. I would suggest that's not speaking to the motion, and she would still be entitled to call the question. If her comments went beyond that and she spoke to the motion, then I think she would not be able to call the question. So I think that's the first decision you'll have to make. Did she speak to the main motion or not? If she did not, she could call the question. And call the question requires a two-thirds majority vote as well.
That's thanks for that clarification. And I believe the first question that Trustee Stone had was whether how to postpone the motion, which I gave a comment, and then she did comment. But the first question was around the postponement and the procedure of postponing the motion, on which I gave a comment. But then I believe she spoke a second time to, I don't know at this point in time, as far as the second time. So I'm going to, said the first question was around the process. And I'm going to, at this point in time, because I have a trustee Mill, if Deb hasn't pushed her mic. Sorry. No, it wasn't there. Trustee Oldfield.
I was just going to speak to whether or not Trustee Stone spoke to the motion, because she did. She spoke. She said that she was not against the motion at this time, so she's spoken to the motion. I was just trying to clarify that so that we could maybe move forward. Thanks.
All right, so I'm just trying to clarify again. As I said, I did see, the first question was around process, but then I believe she did speak. That was what I was saying. She did speak to the motion after that. So then my thing is that at this point in time, the motion is still on the floor. And so because Trustee Stone did speak to the motion, then it means that in order to call the question, as Student Trustee Cameron said, is that that Trustee Stone couldn't call the motion. So, and now, because of that, we have, again, but it's a statement made by a student trustee around deferring it to the next motion, and a student trustee cannot put a motion on the floor, but it can only make a comment. So I still need direction from trustees, and I'm going to the people originally that still haven't spoken to the motion, which is basically spoken to the motion itself, and that is, I'm going to leave Trustee Oldfield to speak about the motion, and then Trustee Miller, and then we will go from there.
I would like to move a motion to defer this to the April 3rd Standing Committee meeting with as much information that staff can pull for us at that time, and at that time we can look at that and make a determination about how we want to proceed.
Okay, so I have a motion to defer. I need a seconder for that motion. I see Trustee Thatcher. Thank you. And now to speak on the deferment of the motion, I go to Trustee Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to agree with that motion.
Thank you. Any other speakers on the motion to defer to the Standing Committee?
Can I call the question?
I see I have no other questions, so I'm calling the question, the motion to defer the decision till the Standing Committee of a report can be provided on the April 3rd Standing Committee. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Yeah. Moving on, the next information items, we start off with the Special Education Advisory Committee report, and I believe it's Trustee Oldfield.
Thanks. This should be much easier than the last item. So at page 110 of the board agenda package, you'll find the SEAC report. A couple of things that I wanted to highlight, and I'm going to highlight a couple of things, and Trustee Miller may have something to add to that too, Chair, at the end. But you'll see that there's a staff report to the Special Education Committee, to SEAC, on the special education plan that the board's required to publish the plan outlining the programs, services provided by the board. It's published on the district website and submitted to the Ministry of Education, and the information required in the plan is defined by the standards which include, but are not limited to, the board's general model for special education, early identification procedures and intervention strategies, specialized health support services in school settings, categories and definitions of exceptionalities, and of course having a special education advisory committee. And SEAC provides important consultation to the board on special education programs and services. Trustees will be provided a report on the special education plan in the spring, typically May, prior to approval being sought for the annual plan in June. So that will be coming forward soon. Also wanted to highlight that the committee heard from staff about the Many Paths document. That's a public resource document required by the ministry for the pathway to IPRC. However, the document doesn't service our current practices and policies, so the committee is in the process of, with staff, revising the document with input and retitling the document to Many Pathways to Success, which is a much better title. And many great suggestions came out of a small group discussion at that committee. I participated in that, and the input from the community was vital and also consistent in terms of what people are looking for. So this document will be reviewed again, and the committee will continue to advocate to the provincial government to update documents from a human rights and equity perspective. Some of the areas of concern that were discussed at the committee, of course, no surprise, canceling of school buses and accessible busing remains a concern. I feel like I say that probably every report, but every SEAC committee meeting, that is a issue that arises. And then the last thing that I want to mention, and it's not coming out of the report, but I wanted to remind the Board of Trustees that the Legacy Autism Program is ending as of the beginning of April, and transition for those students to schools is beginning. So I know I've heard from parents, I'm starting to hear from parents already, maybe some others have also heard from parents, but there are concerns from parents about enrolling their children in school, and this is a subject, of course, that SEAC is a matter that SEAC is aware of, but it's something that I'll bring up at the Thursday meeting to talk about because there is a concern about how the board will be able to accommodate an influx of students. At this point, the number's not known, but that may be something that staff has and that the committee has more information on. So I will report back whatever I am able to glean from the committee. Trustee Miller, is there anything you wanted to?
Trustee Miller?
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Oldfield. I just wanted to additionally highlight this important section on page 113, the Student Program Foundations. It is important to highlight that the majority of the students with special education needs are placed in a regular classroom, and for most of the students, a classroom teacher with the support of the school's special education resource teacher and sports staff is able to provide individualized programming to support student success. A regular classroom is always an option that parents or guardians may consider. And this supports special education advisory, this was also is regular special education advisory committee. The second section I'd like to highlight is the special education programs which are accessed through placement. The Placement and Review Committee's decision for students with special education and strengths, and here particularly it's also important to reflect that the intersectional identities of each student is also a consideration, that the district recognizes the talents, gifts, and abilities each student brings within our schools. Addressing ableism at all levels and varying grades seems to be an idea of minimum standard as opposed to the student meeting their potential. Often the entry in the school, the medical perspective is given and can be the worst case scenario and not the individual person's necessary reality. So in this section, it is discussed that there is much more focus on valuing and honoring the child and their whole self. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Vice Chair Thatcher has a question for the trustees.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Reading the Durham District School Board's Special Education Plan, I found the information to be very comprehensive, and one of my questions was around the date that this would be presented to the Board of Trustees, and I understand that's Trustee Oldfield mentioned it was May. There was just one question I had. There was a document mentioned, the parent-facing document, and I would be interested in knowing is that accessible online? How would I find that?
That document right now is in draft. That is actually something that's being worked on, but presumably because it's a public-facing document, it would be available however we would like it to be available.
Superintendent Andrew McCauley.
Thank you, and through you, thank you for the question, and thank you for the active engagement around the SEAC table and bringing forth voice. Trustee Thatcher, if you're referring to the Pathway to IPRC document, it is both publicly facing within the special education plan. Happy to send it separately, as well as its reference within the parent guardian guide to IPRC. We're at the initial stages of contemplation of change. And so SEAC's feedback was really important, that IPRC is an important action for many students and families, but also how do we amplify voice and choice and identity, centering relationship building at the front end of the process, and a continuation of building staffing and resources, always centering student and family. So quite a bit of work to do on it, which is indicative of our policy into practice implementation. But all of our special education resources, we've made a commitment as a board that they are publicly facing on our website, that we do not differentiate between staff resources and community or family resources, that there is one version of each document that is public facing.
Trustee Thatcher.
Just to be sure that I understand, that will be a document provided on our Durham District School Board website, but at the moment it is in progress. Is that what I understand? Is I understand that correctly?
Thank you, and through you, the current active version is posted publicly. It is the working groups, so we are at initial consultation both within the department and with SEAC, and we'll be also taking it to our Federation and union partners through other tables as well prior to the release of a further document. But the current active document is publicly facing at this time.
Thank you.
Any further questions regarding the SEAC report? Seeing none, may I have I'm assuming Trustee Oldfield or Trustee Miller that you're going to move the receipt of the report as written. Trustee Oldfield?
Thank you, Chair. I move that the report be received as written.
Thank you. And a seconder, Trustee Miller? just okay, thank you, Trustee Miller. All those in favor? Opposed? That report received. Moving on to the OPSPA report, I'm Trustee Cunningham.
This one's even quicker. I have no report at this meeting.
Thank you, Trustee Cunningham. We're moving on. Item 14, it basically has the list of the days of significance, which you can find on page 117. And I'm going to then, seeing no comments at this point in time, I'm going to move on to the memos that are listed. And the first memo is definitely Durham. If trustees, basically, I think you see it in your package, definitely Durham is on page 118, starting on page 118. It's basically establishment of sort of a hall of fame to celebrate public education by showcasing the achievements and success of some of our board's notable graduates or alumni, of former students of the board. Basically, it does require the setting up of basically some trustees to be on that committee as well. Is there any questions on that memo at this point in time? Seeing none. Okay, the next memo is B, which is the Positive School Climates Report. I just wanted to know if there's any questions on that report. Trustee Thatcher hit the button faster, and then Trustee Litton.
I'm going to go first. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I have the original motion in front of me here, and that motion was put forward in October to be presented March the 20th. And probably under normal circumstances, that would be a fairly reasonable amount of time to our expectations would be quite reasonable, but I realize that we've had a number of changes, and we had a new director that started with us in the middle of January, so I can accept that. I just, however, am a little concerned about the fact that it's called a positive school climate report when it's very clearly a report that addresses trends in violent incidents and the impact of violent incidents. And we have been looking for this for some time, but I just would like to suggest to trustees that we take a look at that positive school climate report. It just, for me, I don't think it really addresses that motion.
Director of Education, Camille Williams-Taylor, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. One of the things when we did look at it is that it does identify a question around violence in schools. One of the things that we do recognize, however, is that we do have scenarios where violence occurs in schools, but our ultimate goal is to foster a positive climate both for staff and students. And so to simply create a narrative that indicates violence in schools in the absence of the corollary would be kind of an imbalanced representation. So one of the things we did say in this memo is that we do have the questions that were articulated specifically in the motion, and that we are gathering the data that is appropriate to respond to what has been asked, but we are undertaking to contextualize it in the full picture of what the climate in our schools are.
Trustee Linton?
So again, reading this, and you may have answered it, but it was decided that there was additional data that needed to be incorporated into this report. I'm just wondering if you're able to speak to that in a little more depth.
Certainly, through you, Chair. And so what you see in the memo is that it asks about the nature of the psychological, emotional, and safety in schools, the perception and the experience of safety, and that has been gathered as a part of the school climate surveys, and we are now getting that data together. So the data was not yet ready to be able to incorporate it to answer that particular question, which was a part of the motion. It will be in May.
Supplemental?
Kind of supplemental.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, because there is understanding that, there are depths and levels to this report, but as a region, and other regions across the GTA are also looking at how to incorporate the community safety and well-being plan into the school and school climate, understanding that the violence sometimes starts outside school and ends up in school and vice versa. So I'm wondering if with this additional time, if there's the ability to look at how the community safety well-being plan for the region of Durham may integrate into what you're hearing and seeing, and a plan moving forward.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think a plan moving forward is a little ambitious at this point, but we are able to speak to the fact, to the very point that you make, Trustee Linton, which is we do realize and recognize that some of the issues that we do face in our schools have their origins outside of the schools, and it's through some of the partnerships that we need to establish that we are able to address what we are seeing as a lived reality in our schools. So we are able to, and we have started to interrogate some of that part of the narrative, but I think at this point it would be unreasonable for me to say that there will be, there's a plan going forward. What I can say is that there will be commentary on the plans that have already been undertaken, because we are not in the absence of work around mitigating violence in schools. So I believe a part of the inquiry here is what has already been done and what partnerships have been established, and we will certainly speak to that. Well, I would want to remind trustees as well that we are undertaking the work around the strategic plan. And so this kind of data, this kind of representation is an excellent source of information for you to consider as you think about a strategic plan for the system for the next 4 years, if 4 years is what you've decided. And so when it is that that strategic plan is undertaken, that may very well be where some of the action items are taken out of it in order to propel some goals that you establish coming out of this kind of data.
Thank you. I've got Trustee Thatcher.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I just had a question. The school climate survey is what you're suggesting will be a part of this information, the data that comes forward. Is there a plan for public consultation?
Thank you, through you, Chair. That has already been undertaken.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the memo? Seeing none, we've actually come to the end of our agenda. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Brown and second by Trustee Cunningham. All those in favor? You don't have to do it really, but the motion passes. And good night, everyone. Thank you for staying.